Hello. My name is Michael. I'm now a dad. Dude, you can tell the young adults are at this service. Come on, somebody. That was like, shoot, man. 9 o'clock needs to step it up. That's all I got to say about that. You guys are awesome. It's good to see you. It's good to be back in the saddle, as the kids say. Now that I'm a dad, as a total of 4 weeks, I'm a professional. So be ready for a lot of insights into the character of God from fatherhood, from my understanding of what it means to be a dad now, because I know all things. But honestly, there will be at least 66% of my illustrations will be about her. So, sorry. Anyway, I know why you all are here, though. The baby pictures. So, we'll show you one. Let's see. Jerry, look it up, Jerry. Oh, I know. See, I'm glad she looks like mom. That was my prayer, okay? I was like, God, if you can do me one solid here, because this on that is not gonna work, okay? So she looks like mom. She did, however, get this color on her hair. So I know you guys all wanted to say that. Anyway, she's the cutest. I love her. She's melted my heart. And we've got another for you. So we'll show you one more. Oh my gosh. What were we doing here again? This is church. Okay, anyway, that's her. I love her. I could literally just stare at her for hours. And you parents, you know how it is. Maybe it's bringing you back right now. Jerry, you can clear the photo because I'm not going to be able to focus. Okay, thank you so much. I told you I'd tell you a baby story, so here we go. When she was about less than a week old, a long time ago, she really liked to scream whenever I would go to change her, right? So I'd lay her down on the table and she's like, right? And some of you just got PTSD from 26 years ago and you're like, whoa, stop, okay, I've heard there a while. Okay, she would just scream and yell and I'm like, what do I do? And so I go to change her, which is really genuinely one of the great joys of my life at this moment in time. And so I've got her on the table and I begin to look deep into her eyes and rationalize with her, because that is what all good parents do. You rationalize with your kids. So I look her in the eyes, I'm like, Addie, girl, I love you so much. I know this is uncomfortable. You're going to get even more uncomfortable if I don't change you. Maybe if you could see it my way, you would understand if I don't change you, it's gonna get worse. People are gonna think you stink. You'll probably poop again and make that worse. Furthermore, there is an institution in this country that is called the Child Protective Services. And if I don't change you, they will take you away. I know, there it is. Well, she here. You saw it, right? All you you parents, man, that once that goes off, it's like, Okay, so, am I tired? No, all right. So I look at her, I'm like, okay, you don't understand. So her screaming just persists, right? She's like, keeps going, just like the baby in here. And despite my attempts at reason, my very best attempts, she doesn't seem to understand me. We're still working on our communication. But as that was happening, I was wondering in my mind, I was like, I wonder if this is how God feels sometimes, right? Like when we're going through some sort of trial or some moment of pain and we are just screaming our little guts out on the changing table, just like, God, why? What is happening? The thing is outside of our control, outside of what we can manage, and we're yelling at him, and all the while, I wonder if God's just like making eye contact and doing his very best to rationalize with us, to talk to us and communicate with us. And I wonder if he's lovingly holding us and taking care of our mess and cleaning us up for stuff that maybe we're not even ready for yet. I wonder if he's trying to communicate with us, but we just can't understand the language that he speaks. That language is lost on us on some level. And I wonder if part of that is just because of that gap, right? Between what we can even perceive and what we can understand and what he knows. But here's what's so great about our God is the power is in his hands in every circumstance. So when my baby's on the table, the power is in my hands to change her diaper, okay? She cannot do it by herself. Homegirl cannot lift her head, right? She can't figure out the diaper thing. So it's up to me. I have the power to deal with that. It's in my hands. I also have a plan. She doesn't know I have a plan. She thinks we're just playing torture the baby. That's not the game. The game is clean the baby because it's gonna go bad, right? And so I have the power, I have the plan, and yet she can't see it, right? But it's the same way with us and God. God has the power, he has the plan, but sometimes we don't see it and we don't get it. And so this issue of power is really an issue that I think if you look at humanity, like since, I don't know, the species started, has been a problem. Power is a problem, it's a problem for us. And you could really categorize just about every type of sin that we've ever committed, every rebellion against God, as a power play or a power move. Us saying, actually, God, I know better. I know you said this isn't good for me, but this is what's gonna make me happy now. I know you said this isn't good for me, but it really feels good. Or I know you said this isn't good for me, but come on. And we have this power play that happens every single time that we rebel against him. This issue of power is something that has been a problem for us since we started as people, since this whole fall thing. It's an age-old issue. And the question of power is one that many different people have tried to answer. What do you do with it? How do you use it? How do you attain it? And then after you've attained it, how do you secure it? Go back to 500 BC, you've got Sun Tzu and the art of war. That whole thing is about how to exact power over others. It's through deception, through knowing your enemy, through conquering and crushing, absolutely. Fast forward to the Renaissance. You've got Machiavelli and the Prince. And everything that was in his book was, again, deception, power, manipulation. Modern times, you've got a book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. This book, maybe you've heard of it. It's like a self-help thingy. It has sold 1.2 million copies in the United States alone. It's a lot of copies. This book is outlawed in certain prisons. It's in the Salt Lake Times if you want to fact check me. Okay. It's outlawed in certain prisons because of the manipulation tactics that are in there. And get this, it's a favorite among celebrities. Go figure the connection there. 50 Cent loves it. He actually wrote a couple chapters in a reissue. Drake has some lines about it. Calvin Harris has Law 28 tattooed on him, okay? This 48 Laws of Power. Why is it something that matters to these people? Well, let's just look at a few of these laws just for kicks. And let's see what maybe the difference is between that and the kingdom. Law number 3, conceal your intentions. Law 15, crush your enemy totally. This is the book, guys. Not like I've read it. Law 20, don't commit to anyone. Law 34, be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. Law 38, think as you like, but behave like others. Do any of these seem antithetical to the gospel? Like some of you walked in here like, I thought we were talking about the Bible today, Michael. What is this? Okay, hang on, because we're gonna get there. Look, each one of these things has a contradiction in the word of God, okay? Conceal your intentions. Oh, I don't know. Let's try John 2:24. Jesus knows what's in the heart of man. You can't conceal your intentions from him. He has the power. No matter how much we would try, he would always know. Crush your enemy totally. Luke 6:36. Be merciful as I am merciful. That's antithetical to this idea of power that the culture would say is power. He says, show mercy to your enemies. In these books, it says, if you show mercy, they're gonna come back and take you out. Jesus says, show mercy. Don't commit to anyone. Oh, I don't know, how about this faithful God who calls himself faithful, and the very love that he has is known as faithful love, who is faithful to a group of people who has spit in his face generation after generation after generation, and yet he is still faithful to them. He is commitment. He's the very basis of commitment. His steadfast love that endures forever. Be royal in your own fashion. I don't know, you look at John 18:36 and Jesus says, I am a king of my own kingdom. There's only one king in the kingdom, and that's Jesus. In Revelation 19:16, he's the King of Kings. That's tattooed on his thigh. Like, you gotta mean it if you get a tattoo, right? Law 38, think as you like, but behave like others. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, 27 through 28, it says, Jesus says about these people who were double-minded, who acted one way and were really the other. He says, I detest their double-mindedness, their whitewashed tombs. Do you see how what the world would say is power is so opposite from what Jesus says is power? Like what real power is actually laying down our power to God. And in fact, any degree of power we may think that we have, we really don't have. We're self-deceived when we think that we're powerful or when we think that things are gonna work out the way that we want, because power so easily entraps us. We go through great lengths to attain it, great lengths to secure it. And what happens is we fall victim to putting ourselves on the throne in our heart and not leaving God on the throne of our heart. And so what do we do with this issue of power? Because maybe you're sitting here, you're like, I don't have a problem with power, okay? Well, not me. Well, just go with me for a second here, because if you're in this room, it's likely you live in one of the surrounding areas. And if you live anywhere, I don't know, remotely within 30 miles of this location, you're likely competent at something. You don't live here without being competent. You don't live here without having attained some degree of success. And with that comes a degree of power. Maybe you're in charge of something, maybe you're an employer, maybe in your business, maybe it's some practice, maybe it's even just in your family. You have some degree of power. And so what do we do with it? And what's the kingdom way to deal with power? What we're gonna see in the Gospel of John today is this. If the power is in God's hands, we have to trust God's plans. It's that simple. If it's in his hands, we trust his plans. So we're in chapter 11, and we're picking up right after one of the most impressive miracles that Jesus does. He raises a dude from the dead, okay? His name was Lazarus. David did an incredible job weekend talking about it. One of my favorite parts is when Lazarus comes out of the tomb and he still has the head wrap on, and everybody's freaking out apparently because he's like, whoa, that was a long nap. And then Jesus has to tell them, take the head wrap off. Hilarious. He's like, come on, guys. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what we're doing here. So they take it off, and people see this resurrection miracle that Jesus does. He demonstrates that he has power over death. And so after witnessing this, here's the crazy thing. People saw this happen and still didn't believe. They saw him raise this dude who was dead for 4 days. They start to stink after that time, okay? Dead for 4 days, it comes back to life. And in verse 45, it says, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary had seen what he did and believed in him. That's the good part. Some actually believed. Some bought into it. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council, also known as the Sanhedrin. It's a group of 70 different leaders of the Jewish people. Some of them were Pharisees. Some of them were Sadducees. They got together and they said this. What do we do? This man performs many signs. What are we gonna do? Now, if you're here and you're maybe kind of new with us, the question is, well, what signs? What signs is he talking about? I wanna take just a minute and look back at these signs because we're actually at a very pivotal point in the Gospel of John. This is the end of Jesus's earthly ministry time. For the next few months, we're gonna be looking just at the last week of Jesus's life. And so this is where we come to the end, and many scholars would call the first half of the book of John the book of signs. We see sign after sign after sign that Jesus is the Messiah. In John 20, 30 through 31, it says that these signs were written that you would believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Before that, it says that there were many other things that John didn't write down. In fact, if you look at John's miracles, many of them are not in the other synoptic gospels. It's not in Mark or Matthew or Luke. John wrote and selected very specific stories to tell us about something about Jesus that we all need to know. So what is it? There's actually this coronation idea that he's becoming king, that he's come to be king, and he does that and shows that through these signs. So let's look at a couple of them, okay? Let's go back and try to trace maybe some of the commonalities. The first one, Jesus turns water into wine. That's amazing. Okay, some of you are woohooed. It's okay, we can woohoo here. I'm not gonna woohoo on stage because, look, I'm gonna get an email, gosh dang it. Anyway, the first one, it's in the Bible, okay? The first thing he does, he turns water into wine. I didn't make it up, he did, okay? So he goes, and there's this feast, and they run out of wine, and they're like, uh-oh, big shame time. They're gonna fall victim to it. And so Jesus comes through and says, let's do this thing. He gets a bunch of guys lined up, and they make this water into wine, and it's a symbol of joy. This new kingdom that he was gonna bring is gonna be one that's characterized by joy. It's evidence of the Messiah. He says, I'm here, I'm ready. And that's the first sign that he does. The next sign is the healing of the official son. I love this one because there's this nobleman, he comes up to Jesus and says, my son is sick, what do we do? I need him healed. And what Jesus does that's so incredible is all he says is, go, your son is healed. He healed him with just a word. Now you'd think with a miracle, you might need to lay hands on somebody, maybe rub some oil like Simba or something, like you might need to pray over them, touch the part that's broken, whatever. No, Jesus is just like, he's healed. His word is the power. Okay, he didn't even have to look at this person to know that he could heal him from that far away. He's demonstrating his own power. He grants life by just his words. The next one, he heals a lame man by this pool of Bethesda who was laying there. He heals him on the Sabbath. That was a no-no. You're not supposed to do work on the Sabbath. He heals him on the Sabbath. And what that demonstrates is that he was powerful over the Sabbath. Not only that, he says, I did this because my dad is working today. If you guys know your Bible, he's talking about God. He says, I'm actually God. I can do what God does. What? And so people start wanting to kill him right then and there when he heals this person. The next miracle, he feeds 5,000 people out in the wilderness, probably more. Probably closer to 15K, okay? Because you have to add up all the women and children, because back in Bible times, they didn't count those. There were a lot of people. They get fed by Jesus. And what Jesus demonstrates there is he's sovereign over all natural things in this world. Not only that, but he has the power to give the bread of life. He has the power to give us what will truly sustain us, what will truly bring provision. There's this healing of a man born blind. This one is really special because no one had really healed a blind man before. If you look at some of the different things that happened in the Bible, there are a lot of different miracles, but healing a blind man hadn't really happened. And part of that is because the healing of a blind man was something that was promised in the book of Isaiah to specifically be done by the Messiah. So when he heals the blind man, the lights go off. Whoa, this is a messianic miracle. He's either a fraud or he's actually the Messiah. He demonstrates that he has the power to give sight to the blind, but also sight to the spiritually blind. The next one that he does, that we talked about last week, is he raises Lazarus from the dead. This is the culmination of it. It was all leading toward this. He showed his power over different elements in this world and different aspects, and then he raises somebody who was dead, confirmed dead. The people were sitting Shiva already, weeping and wailing for this man who was dead, and Jesus performs the miracle, demonstrates his power over life and death. The final one is ultimately going to be his resurrection. But here's the trick. He actually said that was going to happen in chapter 2. So we could have probably put it as number 2. I put it as 7 because chronology, people. Anyway, but he actually says in chapter 2, you see this temple? I'm going to tear it down and raise it back up. They're like, what are you talking about, Jesus? And then in the Bible it says this was a sign of what he was going to do. The same word there used for every other sign that Jesus performs. The resurrection. And it's the resurrection of Jesus in which he demonstrates himself as the suffering servant who paid for our sins, who created new life in us, who can give us a new life, who makes us his temple and his dwelling place. So each of these miracles, they all build into these ideas. Number 1, who is Jesus? Number 2, what power does he have? And number 3, why is he here? All 3 of them contribute to those ideas. And so the first one is, Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Nobody else could have done this kind of stuff, especially on a Sabbath, especially with someone who had been dead for all this time. It also shows that all authority on heaven and earth was given to him. All power was given to him, every ounce of it. And so he was able to do what he needed to do. Why is he here? He was here to glorify the Father, to seek and to save the lost. And so each of these miracles contribute to an understanding of what he was sent here to do in the first place, what his character is like, and why he's here. Now, we've heard these signs, right? As you come to the close of the Gospel of John, there's this moment where Thomas comes up to Jesus, and we have another kind of half sign where he says, Jesus, if it's really you, show me the scars in your hands. I want to see that sign. And so Jesus says, okay, Thomas, come on up. You can touch the scars in my hand. And so he comes up and touches him, and he sees the sign that Jesus, in fact, was the one who died on the cross and came back. And so what's interesting about that is Jesus says, great, Thomas, you did it, you believe, but blessed are those who are going to believe without seeing this. Who do you think he's talking about? You guys, me. We are blessed because we believe having not seen these signs. The way that we believe is solely through testimony. Meaning somebody had to say, Jesus rose from the dead, and tell somebody else, Jesus rose from the dead, and continue on saying that. It's that miracle, it's that sign that builds the entirety of our Christian faith. It's what the substance is. It's not about being a good person. It's not just some sort of self-help guru kind of thing. It's not about saying the right things. It's not about getting to some level of success in our business. It's solely and completely about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's it. And in fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, he says, if the resurrection didn't happen, everything has been in vain. You all just wasted the last 15 minutes of your life. You're welcome. Also, presumably, you've wasted the last handful of Sundays you've been here. If it didn't happen, it's a waste, it's useless. Because Jesus wasn't just a moral teacher. He wasn't just some good guy who lived and set an example. He was telling people he was God from the get-go. That's either a crazy dude or he's right. We believe he's right. We believe that resurrection that happened, it really happened, and that's the substance of our faith. And it's from that place of believing in the resurrection that the rest of our lives and the rest of our faith is informed. That's the gospel of Jesus. That's the sign we believe. And so the people hearing this, what the Pharisees had said, they're like, okay, so what do we do with this? We either believe it or we don't. There's really no neutral position here. And so the Pharisees and this group of people in the Sanhedrin, they say this, verse 48, they're brilliant. They said, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. You're right. You're actually right. If this dude keeps raising people from the dead, you don't have a shot, okay? So they were right, get an A+. And so they said, if we keep letting this happen, the Romans are gonna come, they're gonna take our place, they're gonna take our nation. We're talking about the temple, we're talking about their people, the two things that made up the substance of what their power was. You see, the Sanhedrin had power. It was perceived power. Their power came from the Roman government. They existed in a delicate balance of power. All power is really delicate. Everyone in power is one move away from losing power. That's why people work so hard to cover things up, to lie, to deceive, to maintain power. They're one move away from losing everything. They know it. And so here's what happens. They're like, we've got to do something about this guy, because if this keeps going on, we're going to lose everything. So verse 49, it says, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest, I like to think of him as the head partner at Moses and Sons law firm. He was in charge, and so he gets up and he's like, all right, guys, here's the deal. Here's how we're going to make this happen. We need to figure this out. He says, you guys don't know anything. In other words, he's the big smart guy with the glasses. He knows what's right. And so he says, look, you know nothing at all. It's worse than you know. If it keeps going, we are going to lose everything. And then he says, nor do you understand that it's better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. See how he kind of like deceptively makes it sound like he's being a good person? He just kind of conceals what he's saying with the moral right, the moral good. Caiaphas was a Sadducee. They didn't believe in the resurrection, okay? That's part of what made them so sad. And, sorry, I had to, okay? It's from my grandpa. I love you. Anyway, he had so many good Bible jokes. All right, so they're sad. They don't believe in the resurrection. He hears about this resurrection, and he's like, there's no way. Resurrection doesn't happen, okay? These were the people who were Jewish by culture. They were Jewish because they were allowed to be in charge of things. They were jockeying for position. And so he's like, there's no way this is even possible. He had been ruler for about 18 years is what he's gonna do. 3 years from the time he says this, he's gonna get removed from power. He's done, he's toast. He was right. This is it. And so he goes on saying these things. And what's funny is, I wonder if, people like Machiavelli were inspired by this. Machiavelli says this in The Prince. He says that the show of religion was helpful to the politician, but the reality of it was hurtful and pernicious. It's like he got inspiration from the Pharisees, who act religious, but they're really not. They're in power, they need to appear good, but they're really not. He says it's better for the nation, acting like he's got the right play, like it's what's best for the people. And what I so love about this is where the central truth comes from, okay? The power is actually in God's hands this entire time. Now, you guys know what dramatic irony is? I know you do. You're all well educated, okay? Dramatic irony, all right? It's when they say one thing, but it's really like kind of meaning another thing. And if we know the story and can step back, we're like, oh, that's what he means. Get this. What he's saying is more true than he even knows. Well, hit him with the next verse, Jerry. 51. Yeah, dude. Hey, this is Jerry's last week. Can you give it up for Jerry? We love Jerry. Jerry's moving to Florida. We love you. Thank you. Okay. This is what it says. It says, he did not say this of his own accord. Caiaphas thought he had the power. Caiaphas thought he was right. He didn't say it of his own accord. Get this. When he was being high priest, he actually prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. Does this sound like the gospel to anyone? What? This is incredible. Like, he thinks he has the power. He doesn't. This whole time he thinks he's right. He thinks he's got it figured out. No, God's plan was for him to think that he had it figured out. God's plan was for him to think that he had power, to think that he was gonna fix things, do God a solid. Let me tell you, God doesn't need any favors from us. He really doesn't. The power is in his hands. So he's absolutely right. Jesus will do this. And this is actually the gospel. The gospel is this, is that one man, one perfect man, who himself was God, chose to come to this earth to empty himself, to take on the form of a servant, and to suffer on our behalf. He dies for the sins of all man. He's risen again, and in doing so, he secures life for you and for me. That's the gospel. That's what Jesus does. And that's right here in this prophecy. That's exactly what God's plan was. It's incredible. I love when I've been reading through the Gospel of John, I've been impressed time and time again. Like I'm surprised that I'm impressed. You know what I mean? Like I'm reading the Bible, I'm like, whoa, this is so brilliant. Like the irony that's going on, the fact that, whoa, God planned this. It's so amazing. And so this is where it lands. It lands right here. They say, we need to kill him. Verse 54, or verse 53. It says, so from that day, they said, we need to put him to death. Before they had tried some attempts on his life, that we need to get rid of this guy, we need to kill him. But now, all 70 of them are in this room conspiring what to do to take out this guy who has power. Verse 54, Jesus goes into the witness protection program, okay? He leaves, he hides, he's like, okay, it's not time yet. He goes off into this town called Ephraim, which is probably maybe 15 miles north or west, you decide. He goes that way and he hides out. And you can imagine the content of the conversation that happens while they're waiting there. If you recall toward kind of the beginning of chapter 11, Didymus, my man Thomas, okay? He looks at Jesus and he's like, oh, what? Are we gonna go with you so we die too? He had no idea how right he was. Yes, in going with him, you are saying, I'm with Jesus, and then ultimately, yes, Thomas does die for his faith in Jesus. You can imagine them sitting around the campfire like, we really did it this time, Jesus. What are we gonna do? I'd imagine maybe there was some anxiety that they were feeling like, oh, what's gonna happen? But they really have no idea that this whole thing is really his plan. It was his idea. And so verse 55, it says that now the Passover of the Jews was at hand. This was the third Passover in the book of John. It's the last one we're gonna see. And this is the moment in time in which Jesus is going to go and die for the sins of man. Again, irony is at play. All these people are coming together. They're preparing to be purified, but really the one who's going to purify them is the one sitting on the side, Jesus. They think they're going to be saved by these lambs that they're going to bring and sacrifice. It's really going to be from the Lamb of God, who is perfect and without blemish. So they look at each other, standing in the temple, and you kind of hear that thing from Back to the Future 3, the okay, that starts playing in the background. In verse 55, or verse 56, they're like, so what do you think? Think he's gonna show? Well, I don't know, Clem. He didn't show last time, I don't know. Well, I think he's gonna show up. That's what it says right here, okay? It's literally like the saloon doors are swinging over, there's a tumbleweed rolling through, okay? They're waiting for him to show up. What do you think? He's not going to come to the feast at all? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given order. They knew where he was, that if anyone knew where he was, they should let them know so that they might arrest him, okay? At this point, they had set the stage. Like they had the guy on the rooftop. They had the guy in the saloon. They had the guy on the horse acting like he was doing nothing. They were ready for Jesus, thinking that Jesus was walking into a trap, not knowing that this was his plan all along. They're sitting there thinking, what are you, yellow? Like that's going to get him? No. He has the power. He's coming to bring what it is that he's meant to do, which is to show people that he's really the one who's got this under control. You guys, with a text like this, there's so much that we could dive into, so much that we could take away and explore. But really what we need to know is that if the power is really in God's hands, our only option is to trust God's plans. Okay, that's really the only option. That's all we've got to do, all right? It's in his hands, and we have to decide, what are we gonna do with it? The first thing we need to decide what to do with is what do we do with the signs, okay? Because what John is doing is he is developing a very early understanding of the importance of Christ's death by way of dramatic irony, okay? He's showing, okay, this is what it's gonna mean. Okay, this was gonna be signifying that all peoples are gonna be able to come together under this one person. These responses to the resurrection typify all the different responses we can have. Some are wholeheartedly in, some are unsure, others go into full-blown premeditated murder, okay? They are vastly different responses, but no one can remain neutral with these different responses. And so our question is, what do we do with the signs? You guys have all heard them now. You've heard all of them. We've also now heard testimony after testimony of what God has done, right? Whether it's been through baptism, whether it's just hearing the gospel. What we know is true is that none of us are without excuse when it comes to hearing the gospel. Here's what we see in Romans 1. God, since the beginning of time, has showed us that he is real and that he exists through creation. You look at a canyon, you stand at the base of El Cap in Yosemite, you look at the ocean, you look at a massive tree. Every time that you do that, what it beckons within you is the question, where did this come from? Is there something other than this? That is called natural revelation, okay? There's a natural thing that God has done in revealing himself to our creation that compels us to ask the question, where is this from? That's the first one. The second one is called moral revelation. Okay, the judicial sentiment in your own heart when you say, that's not fair. You don't have to teach kids to say that's not fair. You don't. I know that, and I'm only 4 weeks in, okay? You don't have to teach kids how to do that. They know, hey, that's not fair. And that continues throughout life. That's not fair. We should redistribute things or whatever, right? We want to say that's not fair. It's built into us. That judicial sentiment within us is evidence that there is a God. Where did it come from? We didn't evolve for the good of the tribe. You look at the different literature that was developed, it was about how to manipulate and how to not trust others. And yet the judicial sentiment in our heart says, no, we need to say what's true. We need to actually work together. These things come from God. And so in Romans 1, what we see plainly is we're all on the hook because we've got nature and you say things aren't fair. Those are the two things at least. And then here's what's so great about where we live. We have the Bible in our language. It's called special revelation. God reveals himself to us in his word. We have it available to us. There's people who don't have that available in their language, but we do. And so as a people, as a culture here in America, we are on the hook as of whether or not we buy into the signs. We each have to grapple with whether or not we believe Jesus is the one with the power, or whether or not we want to be the one in control. And that's really hard to do, especially as people. And that's kind of where that phrase desperate dependent comes from. Maybe you've bought the t-shirt already. If not, they're at the Connect tent. Anyway, look, that phrase is something that's actually, it just kept carrying with us, okay? Like someone said it in a sermon, probably you, at one point, and it's just like still going. It's the sermon phrase that keeps on giving, okay? Desperate dependent. Here's why. Because so much in life can actually be kind of summarized by whether or not we're desperate and dependent. We were, during Lexi's kind of labor and stuff, let me tell you, it was hard work, okay? She did a lot, and she went through a lot, and toward the end, I just kind of watched. I'm like, I'm gonna help. But toward the end, she had to have this like emergency surgery, and we go to the OR, all right, and I'm all scrubbed up, and I had said multiple times to the medical professionals, because they are professionals, I get that, okay? I'm like, hey, the epidural thing didn't take right on this side. You're gonna have to switch that out before you do the surgery. Okay, sir, thank you, that's fine. No, you don't understand. You gotta switch it out. I said it multiple times. We get into the OR, we sit down, and this guy comes out, and I had been sitting there just like powerless, right? And knowing that there's nothing I can do, and that phrase hits me in the side of the head, desperate dependent. I'm like, shoot. Yeah, I am desperate and dependent right now. There's nothing I can do to change this situation. Who has the power? God has the power. Even over these people who were gonna perform the surgery. And so the man comes out and he looks at me, he's like, yeah, the epidural wasn't taken. I was like, really? Thank you for telling me. What happened? He's like, well, we tried some other stuff and had to do it like twice and that didn't really work. And so we did something else. And so she's gonna get numb, like up to about her throat, but there's a point at which she may not be able to swallow, okay? So if that happens, you need to tell us so we can help. I was like, what? I thought that was your job, okay? You're like, that's what you gotta do, just what? And so I go in, I'm scrubbed up like, okay, here we go. And she's laying on the crucifix, okay? Who designed that thing? Those of you who have seen what those look like, okay? Her hands are spread out. I'm like, this is not okay. And I go up next to her and I put my face next to her. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? She's like, hi, because she's all got the stuff. And I'm like, hey, can you swallow? And she's like, I think so. And like tries, and then I'm just like, She's like, I think I did it. I was like, okay. And just like kept my face next to her. Okay, that's all we could do. That was about it. Okay, everything else is in God's hands at the end of the day, right? And so the question is, do we trust his plans? None of that was planned. I'll tell you right now. None of that whole deal was planned. But on the other side of it, we have this beautiful baby girl. And we're experiencing this new understanding of who God is, and we get to grow as a couple in our understanding of each other and teamwork and intimacy, and it's beautiful. But none of it was the plan that we thought, and yet we know that the power is in God's hands. So the question is, are we desperate and dependent? Have you had that sitting in the OR moment? Where you're like, I can't do anything about this. It's all you, God. That's actually the best place for us to be. It genuinely is. The best place for us is in that position of humble surrender. We actually find more power in giving up our power because we actually have his power. And we're like, okay, God, what do you have for me? And that's about it. And so my question for you guys today is, as we prepare to just kind of spend some time in worship of this name of Jesus that has no rival whatsoever. Nothing stands up against God whatsoever. He has all the power. The question is, do we trust in God's plans? Or do we want things to still happen our way? Are we desperate and dependent? Or do we still think that we can kind of control the outcome? The best place for us to be is in a posture of just submitting to God whatever it is that he has for us. And that's actually where we're gonna find true freedom. It's found in that. It's found in the resurrection of Jesus that secured new life for you and for me on the cross so that we might be able to walk in the fullness of life with him. And so that's my encouragement for you guys. I love you. Thanks for letting me do this thing and share with you. God is so good. And would you stand with us and let's worship this Jesus.